A man stands waist-deep in the muddy current of the Jordan River. The water is cold against his skin, pulling heavily at his clothes, and it does carry that deep affection. But if you look closer at the exact vocabulary echoing over the river, at the ancient Hebrew scroll, he will eat bread with hated tax collectors. He will defend prostitutes dragged through the streets. He will sit with a marginalized woman at a midday well. He will not break the bruised. He will not extinguish the weak. The assignment is set. The water falls from his shoulders. The dove hovers in the sudden, echoing silence. But a king who heals the broken does not survive long in a world built by force. And the collision between what the crowd demands and what this servant actually came to do is about to rip the nation apart. Every empire we build is made of heavy stone and sharpened iron. We understand the cold weight of a bronze shield. We understand the marching rhythm of boots on cobblestone, the crack of a leather whip, the heavy, iron-bound doors of a prison cell. When human beings want to solve a massive problem, we reach for leverage. We look for someone with enough capital, enough volume, or enough violence to force the world into the exact shape we desire. The first-century world was suffocating under exactly that kind of leverage. The Judeans lived with the daily, stifling reality of Roman occupation. They watched foreign soldiers patrol the white marble steps of the temple courts. They paid heavy taxes to a distant emperor who demanded to be worshipped as a god. They were waiting for a Messiah who would speak. Those specific words are pulling from you. Start to see something the polite Sunday school version completely misses. The voice from the sky is not a generic blessing, and the language of the empire, back to it, just louder, and with far more blood. They wanted a warlord, but the Father points to the servant. When God speaks Eudokeo over the water, he activates the prophecy of a Messiah who will refuse to pick up a sword in the midnight darkness of Gethsemane. He endorses a king who will kneel on a dirt floor, take off his outer garment, and wash the calloused feet of the man who is actively plotting to sell him. He crowns a sovereign who will allow Roman executioners to drive rough iron spikes through his wrists without calling down a single angel to stop the hammer. The divine strategy completely subverts human instinct. We expect heaven to conquer by inflicting pain on the enemy, but the servant conquers by absorbing the pain into his own flesh. The kingdom of God is not an empire of force. It is an empire of wounds. When the voice tears through the sky over the Jordan River, it is not just validating Jesus of Nazareth. It is actively invalidating our entire definition of power. God is stating, publicly and permanently, that the ultimate strength of the universe does not look like a tightened fist. It looks like an open hand, and that open hand is deeply unsettling, because a God who refuses to conquer by force is a God you cannot use for your own political agenda. If the Messiah is a military general, you just have to enlist in his army and march in his ranks. It is a terrifying job description. When the Father speaks over the water, he is not just telling the crowd that Jesus belongs to him. If he is a political revolutionary, you just have to protest in his streets and shout his slogans. But if the Messiah is the servant of Isaiah 42, the one who quietly heals the bruised reed and protects the dying, smoldering wick, then following him requires a complete dismantling of your own pride. It requires you to drop the heavy armor you have been wearing. It requires you to lay down the very weapons you thought you needed to survive in a hostile world. The crowd standing in the mud that afternoon did not understand this yet. They heard the thundering voice from the torn cloud and assumed the military campaign was finally launching, and the war was beginning. But the first battle of this new kingdom does not take place against Roman soldiers in a crowded city street. The very first place this newly endorsed servant goes is somewhere entirely empty. A wet footprint presses into the dry, red dust. Jesus walks away from the river. The water of the Jordan evaporates from his skin. The shouts of the crowd fade behind the jagged limestone cliffs. The white-hot sun beats down on his shoulders. The air begins to taste like salt and dead earth. The Gospel of Mark tells us that the Spirit immediately drives him into the wilderness. The Greek word is ekbalo, to throw out, to violently expel, He is not led into a palace. He is thrown into a furnace. He is dropping a hyperlink. He is quoting a very specific 700-year-old piece of poetry. He is activating a script. The heavens were torn open, and now they are completely silent. The Father spoke, and now there is only the howling wind. The dove descended, and now the wild beasts circle in the freezing dark. For 40 days, the jagged rocks are his bed. His stomach hollows out. His lips crack and bleed in the arid heat. The cold desert night sinks into his bones, and in the absolute, deafening isolation, the adversary comes to him. The enemy does not attack his theology. The enemy attacks the exact identity the Father just declared at the river. If you are the Son of God, the adversary whispers the oldest lie in the universe. If your Father actually loved you, you wouldn't be starving in the dirt. If heaven was actually pleased with you, you would have a throne, not an empty wasteland. Prove it. Turn these stones into bread. Throw yourself from the temple. Take the kingdoms of the world by force. The temptation is not just about food. It is about leverage. The adversary is begging him to abandon the profile of the bruised reed and pick up the iron sword of a conqueror. He is tempting him to use his divine privilege to bypass the agony of the human experience. And the moment that phrase rings out across the Jordan Valley, every first-century expectation of what a Messiah is supposed to be shatters on contact. But Jesus holds the line. He refuses the shortcut. He refused the spectacle. He refuses the crown of the nations. We instinctively assume that when God is pleased with someone, He rewards them with comfort, with ease, with a smooth path forward. But the timeline of the Jordan shatters that assumption. The moment of supreme public validation is immediately followed by a season of brutal, isolated deprivation. The wilderness is not a punishment for the rejected. It is the proving ground for the beloved. The servant embraces the hunger, accepts the silence, and survives the test. But the echo of that 40-day trial and the massive weight of the word eudokeo spoken over the muddy water does not stay trapped in the first century. It crosses thousands of years, reaching forward to confront the exact way you measure the worth of your own life. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The timeline of the river reveals something profoundly disruptive about how heaven measures your worth. Jesus hears the words, "I am well pleased," before he has healed a single leper, before he has preached a single sermon, and before he has walked on a single drop of water. He is 30 years old. Up to this point, his life has consisted of sweeping up cedar dust, shaping heavy timber with calloused hands, and quietly existing in the absolute obscurity of a rural hillside town. The people on the banks wanted a warrior. They wanted a king with a sword of iron who would drive the Roman legions into the Mediterranean Sea. He had not built a platform. He had not launched a public movement. He had not done a single thing the modern religious world would consider spectacular. And yet, standing waist-deep in the cold, muddy current of the Jordan, the Father looks at him and declares complete. Ute satisfaction. If you are in a season where you feel completely unseen, where you are grinding through the mundane routine of normal life, this detail changes everything. We are a generation exhausted by the constant pressure to produce. You wake up every morning feeling the heavy, suffocating demand to prove your worth by what you can build, what you can fix, or what you can achieve. You carry the quiet, crushing fear that if you stop performing, if you drop the ball, if your output slows down, if you fail to be extraordinary, heaven will simply look away in disappointment. You treat God's approval as a wage. You think it is something you have to earn by being disciplined enough, strong enough, or spiritually productive enough. But the voice at the river shatters that entire economy. Validation is not a paycheck you earn through spiritual exhaustion. It is a reality you inherit through the servant. The Father's eudokeo was spoken over a carpenter who had done nothing spectacular yet, precisely because his identity was anchored in sonship, not in his visible output. God does not love the future, idealized, highly productive version of you. He is thoroughly pleased with you in the obscurity. He delights in you when, They wanted thunder. They wanted vengeance. They wanted the empire to burn. But the voice at the Jordan announces a different kind of kingdom. You are just sweeping the floor. When you are doing the quiet, unglamorous work of simply getting through the day. If you are in a season where you are terrified that your failures have disqualified you, or your lack of visible success means heaven is silent, look at the profile of the one who took the assignment. Look at the servant of Isaiah 42. When you are bent over in the mud, bleeding sap, and completely useless to the empire of force, he does not step on you. When your flame is dying, giving off nothing but acrid smoke that stings your eyes in the dark, he does not extinguish you. He cups his hands around your fragile, exhausting life, and he breathes. And when you step back and look at the sheer scale of what was set in motion in that water, you realize the voice from the torn sky was never just about a single afternoon in the desert. Picture the scene one last time. The water drips from his beard. The dove hovers in the sudden, ringing quiet of the valley. The wild-eyed prophet steps back in the mud, realizing the world has just permanently shifted on its axis. 30 years of sawdust and silence ticked by, and the perfect timing of heaven finally arrived. The declaration is not the introduction of a military conqueror. It is the unveiling of a suffering servant. A carpenter waded into a muddy river, and the sky was violently torn apart. The Father spoke an ancient, forgotten word, and the expectations of a warlord shattered. The servant was thrown into a starving wilderness, and the oldest lies of the adversary were broken. A bruised reed bent in the dirt, and the hands of a king bound it back together. A smoldering wick faded in the dark, and the breath of the Maker brought it back to life. The Creator of the universe stepped into our fragile flesh, and a new kingdom was won, not by inflicting pain, but by absorbing it into his own chest. One river, one word, one radically different king. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the timing of that voice. The heavens did not tear open after the resurrection. They did not tear open after the blind could see or the dead were raised. They tore open over a 30-year-old man, dripping with river water, who had done absolutely nothing the world would call spectacular. If you are in a season where you feel like you are failing to produce, where you are crushed by the demand to prove your worth, this is not just a theological technicality, because how you understand what happens in this muddy water changes how you read every single interaction through your output. Let the voice from the torn cloud wash over you. The Father does not require your performance to declare his pleasure. He is not a master demanding a wage. He is a father announcing a son. If this opened something in you, subscribe, leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to earn heaven's approval. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts. And may the God who has never once demanded you conquer the world before he loves you, walk with you through your own wilderness, and breathe life back into the smoldering wick of your faith. Jesus has for the next 3 years. It changes why he touches the contagious. It changes why he eats with the traitors. The smell of crushed reeds and wet dirt hangs in the afternoon air. He has no crown. He has no army. It changes why he eventually lets soldiers lay him flat on a piece of wood and drive iron through his flesh. And on a much deeper level, it completely rewrites what it actually means for God to look at your own life and say he is pleased. But to feel the absolute shockwave of what was spoken that afternoon, you cannot start with the voice from the clouds. You have to start with the long silence that came before it. You have to ask why the Word made flesh spent 30 silent years sweeping up sawdust, waiting for a very specific number on the calendar before he ever walked down to the river. 30 years is a long time to remain hidden. In the modern world, we obsess over early success, constantly tracking what someone has achieved by the time they hit their mid-20s. But in the ancient Judean mind, the timeline operated on a completely different scale. Jesus spends 3 decades in profound obscurity, his hands thickening with calluses, his lungs breathing in the scent of cedar dust, his ears accustomed to the sharp scrape of a plane against rough olive wood. The carpenter's bench was not a delay. It was a countdown. If you trace the cultural and religious architecture of ancient Israel, You hit a very specific legal requirement, buried deep in the Book of Numbers. Chapter 4. He has spent 3 decades shaping heavy timber and lifting rough stone in a hillside town most people use as a punchline. Moses is laying out the regulations for the Kohathites, the specific clan of Levites, entrusted with carrying the most sacred objects of the tabernacle. The text is rigid and precise. A man could not touch the holy things, could not enter the active service of the priesthood, and could not bear the weight of the sanctuary until he reached a specific threshold. 30 years old. You could not rush the timeline. You could not bypass the requirement just because you felt uniquely gifted or spiritually mature. Until your 30th year, you were not authorized to stand between the divine presence and the fragile, broken humanity of the nation. You could not carry the golden vessels or stand before the altar, where the heavy, thick smell of burning fat and incense filled the air. The law demanded full maturity before a man could shoulder the crushing weight of mediation. So the Word made flesh waits. He submits himself to the slow, grinding reality of a normal human life. He experiences the mundane aches of physical labor, the quiet obscurity of a rural village, and the rhythmic, predictable passing of the seasons. He does not launch a public movement at 20. He does not gather a crowd at 25. The 30 years were not lost time. They were a strict obedience. He waits until the exact moment he is legally qualified to step into the role of the ultimate high priest. Now, the water drips from his beard. The wild-eyed prophet in the camel hair garment steps back, his hands shaking. He waits until the calendar aligns perfectly with the ancient Torah requirement. And then, he puts down his tools, wipes the sawdust from his hands, and walks away from Nazareth forever. He heads south toward the desolate terrain of the Judean wilderness, toward the winding banks of the Jordan River, where John is submerging thousands of people in the cold water. He steps into the river to fulfill the legal requirements of the priesthood. But what happens when he comes back up for air is not a standard ordination ceremony. The sky violently splits open, and the voice that echoes across the valley does not pull a quote from the legal codes of Moses. It pulls from a prophetic scroll that is about to change the entire trajectory of human history. He steps into the current. The water is thick with silt. The desert sun beats down on the crowd. The banks are packed with the desperate, prostitutes, tax collectors, zealots, Roman soldiers. They have come to be washed. They have come to confess their sins in the dirt. Jesus has nothing to confess, but he wades in anyway. John the Baptist tries to stop him. The wild man of the wilderness shrinks back. He knows exactly who he is looking at, but Jesus insists. The creator of oceans submits to a muddy creek. He bows his head. The prophet places a shaking hand on his back. The crowd on the bank holds its breath. And then, the sky tears open. We are so familiar with this scene that we have anesthetized it. He pushes him under. For a second, the Savior of the world disappears beneath the surface. The water closes over him. The current rushes past. And then, he breaks the surface. Water streams from his hair. It drips from his beard. He breathes in the hot, dusty air of the Judean valley. He opens his eyes, and the heavens tear open. The Gospel of Mark uses the Greek word schizomenos. It does not mean a gentle parting of clouds. It means violently ripped apart. It is the exact same word used later when the massive curtain in the temple is torn from top to bottom. The sky is ripped in half. The Pharisees are watching. The tax collectors are watching. A sudden shadow falls over the river. A dove descends, fluttering down to hover over the dripping carpenter. The murmuring crowd falls dead silent. You can hear the water rushing around their knees. You can hear the wind moving through the crushed reeds on the bank. And then, a voice crashes through the open sky. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Matthew, chapter 3, verse 17. It is a moment of pure, terrifying glory. Many standing on the banks probably just heard a deafening crack of thunder. Some probably fell flat on their faces in the mud. But the words are recorded for us with exact, deliberate precision. God does not give a sermon. He does not explain the theology of the Incarnation. It is printed in children's Bibles, painted in stained glass, and read in quiet, polite voices on Sunday mornings. He speaks a single, staggering sentence. The voice is not a random expression of fatherly pride. It is a calculated, ancient quote. The Father is pointing at a specific sentence written 7 centuries earlier. He is pulling a massive, kingdom-defining prophecy out of the archives and dropping it right onto the shoulders of his Son. To understand the crushing weight of this moment, you have to look at the final phrase, echoing off the canyon walls. You have to look at the word translated as well pleased. But the detail that changes everything is hiding in the final 3 words of that sentence. When you read the English translation of Matthew's account, it sounds like an emotional reaction. I am well pleased. We instinctively picture a proud parent watching their child cross a graduation stage, a swelling of affection for a son who has done well. But if you look at the faded ink dried on the parchment of the earliest Greek manuscripts, the word Matthew uses to record the Father's voice is the verb eudokeo. It means to take pleasure in, to choose, to be favorably inclined toward. It is a beautiful word, but on its own, it does not explain the sheer magnitude of the torn sky and the descending dove. The heavens part, a dove descends, and a voice booms from the invisible heights. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Because Matthew is not just giving us a dictionary definition, he is building a bridge. He is translating the thundering voice of God for a Greek-speaking world, but he is deliberately anchoring it to a very specific, heavy, brittle scroll sitting in the synagogue archives. He is pointing directly at the prophet Isaiah, 700 years before the moment at the river. Isaiah sat with a quill and scratched out a terrifying vision of a coming figure, known only as the servant of Yahweh. In Isaiah chapter 42, verse 1, God speaks through the prophet, "Behold my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights." The ancient Hebrew word used there for delight is ratzah. It means to accept favorably, to be thoroughly pleased with, to satisfy a debt completely. In the ancient Jewish mind, this specific verse was radioactive. It was the introduction to the famous servant songs, a series of dark, complex prophecies, describing a man who would save the world not by shedding the blood of his enemies, but by absorbing their violence into his own flesh. If the realization that these ancient texts are woven together with precise, deliberate hyperlinks is shifting how you read them, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the original language than you knew was possible. So the Father speaks the fulfillment of Ratzah over the rushing water of the Jordan. Most people assume this is just a warm, fatherly endorsement, a divine pat on the back before the difficult ministry begins. And Matthew translates it as eudokeo for the Greek ear. He is doing something far heavier than expressing affection by echoing the exact, unmistakable phrasing of Isaiah 42. The Father is publicly tagging Jesus of Nazareth with the most dangerous identity in the entire Old Testament. He is declaring that this dripping carpenter is the servant. The voice from the sky is not a fatherly pat on the back. It is the handing over of a cosmic assignment. And the problem is, absolutely nobody standing on those muddy banks that afternoon actually wanted the servant of Isaiah 42. Look at the faces gathered on the banks. They want a lion. They want a fire. They want a king who will snap the Roman spear in half. The desert heat burns the backs of their necks. The dust of occupation coats their throats. The imperial taxes steal their bread. The Roman crosses on the hillsides steal their sons. They are tired of bleeding in the dirt. They want a warlord who will finally make the empire bleed. But the scroll of Isaiah paints a different shadow. The voice from the torn sky just activated a completely different script. Isaiah writes that this servant will not shout. He will not raise his voice in the streets. He will not scream for a violent uprising. A bruised reed he will not break. A smoldering wick he will not snuff out. Think about a bruised reed. We read it as the creator of the universe, looking down at his boy and announcing, I love you, and I am proud of you. A hollow green stalk growing right there on the muddy edge of the Jordan River. Bent over, crushed by a heavy passing foot, bleeding sap, completely worthless for building a roof, completely useless for making a flute. A normal man steps on it and keeps walking, but the servant stops. He bends down in the mud. He binds up the broken stalk. Think about a smoldering wick, an ancient clay oil lamp dying in a cold, dark room. The thick, acrid smoke stinging your eyes. Barely a red spark left in the blackened thread. A normal king throws the dying lamp against the wall. A normal king only builds an army of roaring, self-sustaining fires. But this servant protects the dying spark. He cups his hands. He shields the fragile flame from the wind. He breathes life back into the smoke. The Messiah is not the boot that crushes the weak. He is the breath that revives them. This is the profile of the man standing waist-deep in the current. This is the staggering reality of the word eudokeo. The Father looks at a man who will spend his life picking up the crushed, the broken, the dying, and the discarded, and he declares that this is exactly what heaven demands. He will touch the contagious skin of lepers.